Three spine-chilling true neighbor encounters that revealed sinister secrets and haunted secrets. Sarah's heart raced as she walked home from the diner. The moon hung like a lurking spectre, casting shadows that danced in the corners of her vision. Her mind raced with tales of those who had vanished in seemingly perfect neighborhoods, and the dread bubbled under her skin. The whisper of secrets wrapped around Maplewood like the ivy creeping along the fences. Mr. Henderson greeted her each day with a smile that melted the tension from her shoulders, yet something about his collection of war memorabilia made her spine tingle. A rusted helmet that shone like a gash in time, a mounted rifle that loomed in her peripheral like a warning. Had he really fought in battles, or was there something darker lurking behind those stories? As she ruminated on those grim thoughts, a shudder ran through her. Just a quick wave and off, she told herself. But across the street, the Parkers were a whole different story. They'd moved in with all the quietness of a whispering ghost. Their laughter, always just out of reach, echoed unnervingly. It seemed to ripple through the air like shivers surging down her arms. She caught glimpses of them through their blinds, huddled figures shrouded in shadow, whispering in conspiratorial tones, stopping as soon as her gaze fell upon them. Unease coiled tightly within her. Lucy and Ben often spoke of strange noises at night, creaks, soft whispers, and skittering sounds that clawed at Sarah's already frayed nerves. She'd brush it off, but the nights dragged on, stretching into time warps filled with breathless tension. As exhaustion pulled her heavy, those noises morphed into a sinister lullaby that made her skin crawl. Shadows danced in the corners of her room, twisting and chilling her as if warning her to flee. Then the note slipped beneath her door. The paper was cold, like a scrap of death, an anonymous warning urging her to keep her distance from her neighbors. Paranoia clenched her heart like a vice. What did they know? Had they seen something? Sarah's fingers trembled as she clawed at that paper, feeling raw fear settle in her chest. Maybe just confront Mr. Henderson, she whispered to herself, grasping for some semblance of control. But when she faced him, that charming smile twisted, shifting into something unrecognizable. "It's best not to pry, dear. You don't know what lies beneath the surface." His words hung in the air, chilling as ice, coating her skin in panic. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Each uncanny interaction piled on layers of dread. As she tiptoed home under flickering streetlights, cold sweat curling on her neck, an invisible weight pressed her down. She had to protect her children from this suffocating tension. It was her only joy and focus in this shattered facade of safety. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Parkers' whispered exchanges escalated. Shadows spilled out of their yard in eerie shapes. A sudden scream pierced the quiet of Maplewood, sending Sarah's heart into a frenzy. Her instincts screamed for her to flee. Just when she thought she had started piecing together their secrets, an unexpected glance at a hidden truth behind the Parkers' garage shattered everything. What was it they were truly hiding? And more importantly, were those shadows alive? The night stretched before her like a maw, engulfing everything in uncertainty. Would she uncover the truth before it devoured her family whole? A dark swirl of terror converged, leaving Sarah teetering at the edge. One wrong move could mean the difference between safety and doom. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as the screeching wail echoed through the once peaceful streets. The sound sliced through the dark, unnerving in its abruptness. Instinctively she darted behind a neighbor's bush, peering into the gloomy depths of Parker's yard. What she saw next made her blood run cold. The shadows behind the garage twisted and writhed. They undulated as if alive, flinging themselves at the dim light spilling from the house. Sarah's heart thumped so loudly it drowned out her thoughts, her mind spinning like a broken record. Were they in trouble? Was someone being hurt? As she waited, her limbs froze with indecision. She imagined bursting in, fists raised, ready to save whoever was inside. But what if that scream had come from something worse? What if the Parkers were the savagery hiding just beneath the serene surface of Maplewood? Her throat tightened. Just then, the back door swung open and a figure stumbled into the dim light. It was Mrs. Parker, her hair a wild tangle and her eyes wild with terror. She clutched something small in her arms. A child? No, it couldn't be. No child should be in that yard at this hour. "Come on, hurry!" she screamed, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if someone or something was pursuing her. "We have to finish this before—" Her voice broke off, panic spilling from her lips as she dropped to her knees like a marionette with severed strings. Sarah's body tensed as the air thickened with dread. What was she hiding? Without thinking, she took a cautious step forward, peering around the bush to get a better look. The night air was heavy, and shadows seemed to crawl toward her like hungry vermin. Mrs. Parker reached into the dark corners of the yard and pulled out a scattering of bones, opaque and grotesquely gleaming in the moonlight. Her stomach churned, and bile rose in Sarah's throat. The sound of her own heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out every whisper of reason. What had she stumbled upon? "Just a little more time," Mrs. Parker cried, tossing the bones away like they were nothing more than rubbish. "It has to be done tonight." Trembling hands scraped against the ground, uncovering more of the same. It was a grim harvest. Suddenly, Sarah recoiled as a rustle emerged from behind the garage. The shadow seemed to deepen, transforming into something monstrous. A low growl echoed, causing the hairs at the back of her neck to stand on end. Sarah gasped, retreating blindly, her escape route now a distant memory. What were they? As if sensing her presence, Mrs. Parker's head snapped toward her hiding place, eyes wide with a terrified recognition. "Run!" she screamed. "You don't know what you're dealing with!" But before Sarah could turn to flee, icy fingers wrapped around her wrist, pulling her back toward the impenetrable darkness. Desperation clawed at her throat as she felt the suffocating grip tighten. They were coming for her. Just then, she glanced back, taking in the twisted faces of the Parkers, shadowy figures rising behind them like smoke, melding into the night. Would her fears turn into reality? "No, no!" she cried, fighting against the looming terror, the primal force pulling her into the shadowy depths. She had to get home, had to protect her children. But as darkness closed in, the question echoed in her mind. Were any of them truly safe anymore? The shadows danced, inviting her in, as dread hung thick in the air, and as she felt herself being dragged and pulled, the last coherent thought flickered. What if the neighborly facade hiding Maplewood was just an elaborate trap, waiting to snag its prey? A gut-wrenching scream escaped her lips as she struggled against the pull. But the darkness answered, and it craved more. The grip on Sarah's wrist tightened, unyielding as a vice. Panic surged through her veins, and she twisted, striving to free herself from the chilling hold. The shadows released deep, guttural sounds, like the growls of a beast just out of sight. "Help me!" she yelled, her voice swallowed by the night. But who would hear her? The neighborhood was still, save for the whispers of the lurking shadows. "Please, you have to—" With a sudden yank, Mrs. Parker lunged forward, but it wasn't to save her. "Don't! You—" Before she could finish, a sharp scream pierced the air. It was enough to freeze Sarah in place. Was it Mrs. Parker or something else? That disembodied sound echoed in a way that sent her thoughts reeling. Distraction was a killer in these moments, but the creature behind the garage shifted again, creeping closer. "With me!" Mrs. Parker's voice cut through the chaos, urgent yet hollow. "They won't stop until—" "Shut up!" hissed a voice from the shadows, deep and gravelly. The figure of Mr. Parker emerged, standing tall but misshapen in the moonlight. He looked more monster than man, his features distorted and glistening with rain-drenched shadows. "Get away from her!" "But—" Mrs. Parker's protests fell into the pit of darkness, swallowed whole by the creature growing behind her husband. It rose, a massive silhouette with limbs that stretched and twisted, a grotesque parody of life itself. Sarah steeled herself and tried to breach the line between darkness and salvation. "What do you want from us?" she pleaded, glancing one last time at the bones littering the yard, each a silent witness to some horrific ritual. "Blood!" Mr. Parker growled, his voice deeper than storm clouds, rumbling with rage. "It's the only thing that will satisfy." "Not mine!" Sarah screamed, shrugging off Mrs. Parker's grip as adrenaline exploded within her. She surged forward, breaking into a run down the narrow side of the house, heart pounding like a drum. Shadows seemed to sway and reach for her like spindly fingers seeking purchase. Behind her, the growl transformed into a deafening roar. The air trembled. "You can't run from the truth!" they called in unison, the Parkers now merged with the darkness, a chorus of hopelessness. Sarah sprinted toward the end of the street, the edges of her vision blurring with terror. She couldn't breathe. The weight of the night pressed upon her back, and she could almost feel the darkness clawing at her heels, hungry for its prey. What lay in wait behind each corner? What watchful eyes followed her? Then an eerie chill washed over her, and just as she rounded the corner, she collided into someone. She stumbled back, horrified to find it was not a stranger, but another familiar face from the neighborhood, Jason, a boy she'd seen numerous times playing with his friends. "Sarah, quick, we have to hide," he whispered, dragging her toward an alleyway. "Jason, what is going on?" she panted, desperate for an explanation, but the terror around them shattered her focus. "They're coming, the shadows. I heard them talking about sacrifices." His eyes were wide, and she could see the fear gnawing at his soul. Her mind spun. Sacrifices. What did that mean? But Jason didn't have time to speak. They ducked into the alley just as the sounds of chaos exploded behind them. She caught a glimpse of the dark forms, shadows shifting in ways that defied nature. "They'll find us," he said, pressing against the cold wall, breaths quick and shallow. "Why are they doing this?" she gasped, the reality settling in like a heavy fog. "How do we stop them?" Jason's face twisted with dread, his gaze darting to the end of the alley. "I don't know, but I think they want more. They don't just want us." Whatever answer was coming, it was beyond the reach of the night. As they pressed into the shadows of the alley, the panic of city life melted away entirely, replaced by an omnipresent darkness that yearned to engulf them both. In the silence that followed, a chilling thought pierced through her fear. What if the darkness wanted her children next? The tension suffocated the air, leaving her gasping for clarity in the nightmare that was unfolding, ever closer. The alley was narrow, slick with rain, and the air hung heavy with the stench of trash and decay. Sarah pressed against the wall, her heart hammering a rapid rhythm against her ribs. Jason's breath came quick, and she could see the tremor in his hands. They were hidden, but for how long? The noise from the street echoed in, shouts blended with the unearthly growls, a dissonant symphony of chaos, punctuated by shrieks of raw fear. With every sound, Sarah's stomach twisted tighter. She could almost feel the shadows creeping toward them, latent forms gripped by dark anticipation. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know," Jason replied, his tone flat. "But they're looking for something. Or someone." Before she could respond, a low rumble surged through the ground, causing the walls to vibrate. Sarah instinctively gripped Jason's arm tighter, dread washing over her like a cold wave. The world outside had turned into some monstrous version of itself. Then suddenly a figure stumbled into view, a woman. Sarah recognized her as Mrs. Swanson from 2 houses down. Her hair was matted, her eyes wild with terror. "Help! Please! They're everywhere!" she screamed, darting toward them, desperation etched in every feature. "Get back!" Jason shouted, fear slicing through his voice like a blade. It didn't matter. The shadows surged behind her, writhing and hungry. The woman was oblivious, her focus wholly on them. "They took my—" Before she could finish, the darkness surged forth. A powerful shadow clawed its way around her, engulfing Mrs. Swanson in an instant. A scream shattered the silence. Then silence returned, thick and oppressive. Her form went still, swallowed whole by the darkness that embraced it, leaving no sign of where she had been. "Oh, God!" Sarah's voice trembled, her instincts screaming to run, but her body felt frozen in place, like the ice that gripped her heart. "What do we do?" Jason cried, his voice pulling her back to reality. "We need to keep moving," she whispered, fear igniting a sense of urgency deep within her. "Follow me!" With a glance at the darkness that had claimed Mrs. Swanson, they spun deeper into the alley, which seemed to stretch endlessly in the dim light. The further they went, the tighter the confined space felt, as if the shadows themselves were narrowing their path. Jason grabbed her wrist, pulling her to a halt. There's a door!" he pointed. It hung slightly ajar, a dim light spilling out from within. "Is anyone in there?" Sarah asked, her gut twisting. What if it was worse than the night? What if they'd find another sacrifice? "Can't think about that now," he urged, urgency crackling in the air. They dashed toward the door, hearts pounding. As soon as they entered, the warmth wrapped around them like a cocoon. It was a small room, stacked with old furniture covered in dust. An overturned chair lay next to a flickering lamp. Whatever was inside appeared abandoned, but thawed from the storm outside. "Close it!" Jason urged, but it was already too late. The growls from outside morphed into a sticky silence. Dark shapes began forming at the edges of light before flickering out, leaving only a heavy dread that saturated the air. "What if they know we are here?" Sarah whispered, a shiver racing down her spine. "Then we'll have to find a way out." Jason's eyes darted toward a small window, but it was barred. They were trapped. A muffled noise came from above, footsteps pacing with a purpose. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the very walls around them, and a creeping dread slithered through the room. Sarah's eyes widened as a shadow fell across the door, blocking the weak light. "Let's go," she breathed, panic rising like bile. But Jason hesitated, eyes wide. "What if it's one of them?" The laughter grew louder, more sinister. In that moment, Sarah realized with chilling clarity, the darkness was not just out there. It was also closing in on them, and they were running out of time. Just then the door creaked ominously as someone or something leaned against it. "What do we do now?" she gasped, dread compressing her chest as the shadow on the door began to shift, eager to burst inside. In the eerie stillness, one question loomed over them. Who, or what, was coming for them? The door shuddered, the sound of wood creaking under pressure echoing in the small room. A moment's pause, and then the shadow shifted, an outline beginning to form against the dim light. Sarah held her breath, her heart racing like a trapped animal. "Wait," Jason said, his voice barely a whisper. His eyes were locked on the door, the terror etched in his features transforming into something more calculated, a glimmer of a plan, or maybe a desperate hope. And then it came. The door flew open with a force that rattled Sarah's bones. A tall figure loomed in the doorway, silhouetted against the meager light outside. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but she could feel its gaze boring into them, heavy and suffocating. "Run!" Jason shouted, but they both stood motionless, caught in the web of fear that shackled them. The figure stepped inside. Long fingers emerged from the shadows, curling in a beckoning gesture. "You shouldn't have come here," it rasped, a voice that dripped with malice, turning the air thick with dread. Sarah finally regained control of her limbs and lunged for the small window, but the bars were an iron cage. Frantic, she turned back to Jason, her frantic movements catching his eye. "The back!" she gasped, pointing toward a darkened corner where another door lurked, almost hidden by the piles of rotting furniture. With a shared, breathless understanding, they dashed for it, dodging around the encroaching shadow. Jason pushed against the door, but it was stuck, the wood swollen, resisting their urgency. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand. "Oh, God, it's coming!" Sarah shouted, feeling the chill of something malevolent washing over her, like a dark tide rising. From behind them, the figure loomed closer, the malicious grin spreading across its shadowed face. With one last desperate heave, Jason pulled the door open, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. "Go!" he urged. They stumbled inside, the weight of terror propelling them down the stairs. With each step, Sarah's heart raced. The walls were close, damp, and filled with the scent of mildew. The laughter. They could still hear it, echoing from above, mingling with the growls rising in anticipation. Jason paused a moment, glancing back. "What if it follows us?" he asked, wide-eyed and breathless. "It won't follow us," she whispered, trying to reassure him, even as doubt gnawed at her insides. This has to lead out." They descended deeper, the darkness swallowing their surroundings until they couldn't see the rickety steps beneath them. Panic gripped Sarah's throat. This basement, it felt alive with dread. Each footfall echoed ominously. "What if it's just a trap?" Jason breathed, his face pale, glistening with sweat. "We have to trust it's a way out," she replied. Just then, an icy draught rushed past them, and the walls seemed to whisper their fears back at them. The stairwell dipped sharply, and Sarah stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Stars scattered in her vision as she bit her lip to suppress a cry. "Sarah!" Jason reached for her, pulling her back up, but as she regained her footing, a low growl emerged from the dark below them, reverberating like a death knell. "What was that?" she gasped, eyes wide as terror gripped her body anew. "They're down here too," Jason said, his voice shaky, fear evident in his eyes. "We need to get out now." As they moved on, the growl morphed into a cacophony of low, hissing voices. Shadows flared and flickered at the edges of their vision, staggering forms, lurking just beyond the reach of the faint light. Then they stumbled into a larger chamber, a cavernous den filled with echoes. A glint of something caught Sarah's eye, a mirror, cracked and tarnished, hanging crookedly on the stone wall. "Look!" she said, pointing, but her voice cut off as realization settled in. Reflected in the glass was not just their frantic faces, but something else, a multitude of twisted figures, impossibly bound within the glass itself, their mouths opening in silent screams. "No, no, no," Jason whispered, backing away, but as they turned, the room began to contract around them, walls closing in, shadows drawing nearer. In a last, desperate gasp, Sarah grabbed Jason's arm. "We can't stay here." But as they raced toward a tunnel on the far side, the whispers grew louder, dark promises awakening like monsters in the night. And in their rush, neither of them noticed the phantom reflection smiling back from the depths of the mirror, waiting for just the right moment to reach through. What had they unleashed? And did they even have a chance to escape the true horror of their neighbor's secret? The tunnel was a grim passage, the walls slick with moisture, closing in tightly. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing like a battle drum in her ears. Jason led the way, his breath quick and panicked, the dim light failing to penetrate the thick shadows that clung to them. "Keep moving," he urged, glancing back occasionally, fear flickering in his eyes like the meager light from his phone. But Sarah's mind raced with dread. They had escaped the figure above, but now it felt like the very walls were alive, whispering their fears, wrapping around them like cold fingers. "What if it finds us down here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It won't," he said more forcefully than he felt. Just keep going." They pressed on. The hissing voices faded into a long silence, but that only made the tension heavier. It was as if the silence itself was watching, waiting for them to make a mistake. Sarah stumbled again, the ground uneven beneath her foot. "This is sick," she muttered, trying to shake off the sense of confusion creeping in. Jason stopped suddenly. "Do you hear that?" A distant dragging sound echoed through the dark. It was a slow, deliberate rasp that sent shivers along her spine. The noise seemed to come from deeper in the tunnel, a painful reminder that they weren't alone. "We have to hurry," she urged, anxiety tightening her throat. They turned a corner and found themselves in a larger space. An underground room glimmered faintly ahead, but the shadowed corners were impenetrable. In the middle stood a single, heavy wooden table, dirty and etched with strange symbols. A foul odor seeped from the cracks in the air. "Should we check it out?" Jason whispered, curiosity battling his fear. "Are you crazy? We have to find another way out," Sarah replied, fighting the temptation to look. Before she could protest further, Jason took a step forward, drawn in by an unseen force. The air grew cold, causing an electrical charge to pass through her body, a shivering warning that something was terribly wrong. "But what if it means something? What if it's a clue?" he asked, but there was no bravado now, just the trembling edge of fear. Just as he reached for the surface of the table, a loud crash resonated from a far corner of the room, sending both of them jumping back. A dark mass swirled in the shadows, emerging with a sound like a storm, low and threatening. "No!" Sarah shouted, stepping in front of Jason instinctively. "We need to go!" The air thickened as another figure appeared, creeping slowly toward them, its form hazy and indistinct. It was unlike anything they'd seen, a writhing mass of shadows that slithered like smoke yet had weight, pressing down against them. "They're here!" Jason gasped, panic gripping his voice. "We have to get out, now!" She turned on her heel, her eyes darting back, catching glimpses of shadows crawling closer with a new urgency. "This way!" she yelled, sprinting toward a narrow opening on the far side of the room. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins as she fled, the figure's presence trailing them, a dark whisper chasing their every step. Just as they reached the opening, Jason glanced back one last time. "What if they follow us?" he stammered, fear slicing through his defiance. Sarah took a sharp breath, forcing herself to keep moving. "We can't think, we just have to go." As they squeezed through the gap, the shadows lunged forward, a cacophony of hissing and whispers that engulfed the air around them. Then, like shards of broken glass, the last weak spark of their hope shattered. A voice echoed chillingly from the depths behind them. "You can't escape what's already inside." With breath caught in her throat, Sarah and Jason plunged into the tunnel beyond, the darkness swallowing them whole as they raced toward an uncertain fate. But the whispering shadows lingered in their minds. Had they truly escaped, or had they invited the darkness along for the ride? Where would the tunnel take them next, and what would await them in the shadows? The narrow passage tightened around them as they darted through, an oppressive weight pulling at their heels. Sarah could feel the chill of the darkness wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Her heart pounded violently, each thud an urgent reminder of the danger they faced. "Keep moving!" Jason urged, but his voice was strained, laced with fear. They stumbled into another chamber, raw stone walls glistening with water. The air felt thick, heavy with the musty scent of decay. The faint pulse of their phone's light revealed twisted symbols etched into the rock, their meanings lost to time. For a moment, overwhelming dread gripped her like the icy fingers of death. What is this place?" Jason murmured, looking around, eyes wide with terror. "I don't know, and I don't want to find out," Sarah shot back. A prickle crept along her skin, as if unseen eyes were watching them. The dragging noise echoed again, closer this time. It wasn't just a sound, it was a promise of what lurked behind them. The shadows danced as if the darkness itself were alive. She felt the electric static in the air, like a storm brewing just overhead. "Let's go!" she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. There was nothing tangible, but the tension was palpable, a vibrating cord of anxiety that threatened to snap. They moved forward, each desperate step echoing louder than the last. Suddenly, Jason froze. "Did you see that?" His eyes were wide, glimpses of light and shadow reflecting something in the corner. Sarah squinted, straining to see what had unnerved him. A flicker of movement, a figure perhaps, slipped away, vanishing into the dark. Panic clawed at her throat, choking her words. "Don't look, we need to keep—" But before she could finish, the air grew colder, as if something had slipped through the thin barrier between them and oblivion. It was a profound, unsettling stillness that followed, amplifying the sound of their breath. "Maybe we can climb," Jason suggested, scanning the chamber for an exit, but urgency was smeared across his face. "Climb where? This isn't a playground." The dragging sound returned, louder now, bursting forth from the shadows with a sickening persistence. Sarah felt it creeping closer, how the darkness seemed to pulse with life, hungry for them. A new introduction to fear struck when Jason suddenly gasped. "Something's here." He stumbled back, eyes darting. Before she had time to react, something struck the ground nearby with a heavy thud, sending debris flying like the remnants of a shattered dream. The stench of rotten earth filled her nostrils, and she recoiled as what appeared to be a hand shot out from the dirt, a dark, tattered remnant of flesh. "Oh, God!" Sarah whispered, fighting the upsurge of bile in her throat. "Run!" Jason shouted, his voice raw with terror, and that ignited the primal instinct to flee. They turned, rhythmically thrumming against the echo of terror, each footfall another reminder of the mortality they fought to escape. They sprinted deeper into the tunnel, the oppressive darkness closing in, but the dragging sound surged behind them, gaining speed, a relentless predator hunting its prey. As they ran, shadows wrapped around them, like that familiar bitter embrace of fear. The walls pulsed and throbbed, blurring in an ever-present constriction that felt more like a living thing than a mere passageway. "Where? Where do we go?" Jason shouted, panic clawing at his words. "Anywhere! Just away from here!" Sarah screamed, her own dread echoing back at her. They reached a crossroads in the narrow tunnel, uncertainty crashing down around them. Jason looked one way, then the other, as if he could feel the shadows closing in, and each path loomed like a gaping maw, ready to swallow them whole. "Which way?" he begged, eyes wild. Before she could decide, a noise that sounded like laughter, dark and twisted, filled the air. It twisted around them, chilling them to the bone. "Choose fast," Jason urged again, glancing behind him as the shadows seemed to pulse violently, closing in. Sarah froze, her breath hitching. She raised her hand, pointing wordlessly down one path, but uncertainty gnawed at her. As they took their first steps, something sinister lurked just out of sight, almost waiting for their choice. What awaited them down that dark passage? Would it be salvation or doom? Time was running short, and the darkness was hungry. The narrow passage swallowed them as they barreled down the chosen path, shadows clawing at their backs. As the laughter faded, a pressing silence draped over them, more suffocating than the darkness itself. Sarah's heart raced, each beat a frantic drum echoing in her ears. "Why did we choose this?" she gasped, breathless and terrified. "Because it might be better than what's behind us," Jason replied, but his confidence was a fragile mask. The walls felt closer now, squeezing them tighter, as if the tunnel were alive and eager to consume them whole. The flickering light from their phones barely reached beyond the immediate darkness, but every step felt like wading through a thick fog of dread. Suddenly, a guttural growl reverberated through the tunnel, sending ripples of fear shooting through Sarah's spine. She stumbled, nearly losing her balance. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," Jason said, his voice trembling. "What the hell was that?" They pressed on, driven by adrenaline and primordial fear, but the air thickened around them, each breath a labor. Sarah glanced back. Nothing but a blinding darkness filled her vision, yet she felt it creeping up behind them, a malevolence coiling closer with every moment passed. The corridor twisted and turned unpredictably, arteries of shadow branching off in menacing ways. A faint glow emerged ahead, a soft hue that promised some form of escape. Was it a way out, or worse, a trap? "Look!" Jason pointed, eyes wide. "There!" A faint light flickered at the end of the tunnel, pulsing irregularly, as if alive. A hope ignited within her, but it quickly fizzled. It could be just another illusion, an enticing mirage in a hellish landscape. "Do we take the chance?" Sarah asked, anxiety tightening her chest. "We have to," Jason replied, confidence wavering. They hurried toward the light, hearts pounding louder than ever. The growl echoed again behind them, deeper and more furious this time. Panic surged. They ran faster, fear propelling them like a twisted force. As they approached the source, Sarah could see the light revealed carved stone markers peppered with twisted symbols like those before. A warning, perhaps. Among the symbols, a gaping hole opened, dimly illuminated from within. A sense of foreboding filled her, and yet they had no choice but to move on. Jason reached the hole first, peering inside. "What's in there?" "I don't know," Sarah said, fear rising in her gut. Pushing past him, she forced herself to look. Inside lay an ancient room, its walls lined with grotesque murals that depicted scenes of torment and anguish. At the center was a pedestal. On it sat a weathered book, its cover drenched in shadows. "That's—" Jason began, stepping closer. "Don't touch it," Sarah warned, stepping back. "This could be ancient evil." But as she spoke, the floor beneath them trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling like rain, and the growl transformed into a chorus of tortured screams, echoing around them. "We need to get out of here!" Jason shouted, panic now stripping the last vestiges of his courage. They turned to flee when something shifted in the darkness. A figure unfolded, rising from the shadows. Its ragged form was hunched, twisting unnaturally. The very air crackled with its malice, and Sarah's mind spiraled into chaos. "Run!" she screamed, but as they dashed back towards the passage, the light behind them flickered ominously, throwing grotesque shadows against the walls. The creature snarled, and the sound sent chills down her spine, burrowing under her skin like ice. With every frantic step, Sarah could feel the darkness clawing at them, eager to reclaim what had nearly escaped its grasp. The air became thick with despair, and she realized this might be the last choice they ever made. Where would they end up? What awaited them in the merciless dark beyond that light? The growl morphed into laughter again, mocking their escape. The twisting path stretched ahead. Would it lead them to salvation or deeper into the abyss? Time slipped away, and the darkness closed in. They surged down the corridor, panic fueling their flight. The sinister laughter echoed behind them, wrapping around them, mocking their desperation. Every step felt like a race against death itself. The looming shadows felt palpable, like icy fingers brushing against their skin. "Faster!" Jason urged, his voice cracking under pressure. Sarah's legs burned, but she pushed through the fatigue, driven by sheer instinct to survive. The light ahead flickered violently, as if fighting its own fading battle against the darkness. "Is it getting closer?" she asked, glancing back. The creature loomed larger, a monstrous silhouette against the pulsing light, its twisted limbs moving unnaturally, like something from a nightmare made flesh. "I don't know," Jason shouted, voice strained. "Just keep running!" As they closed in on the light, a shudder ran through the walls. The grotesque murals seemed to writhe as shadows danced upon the stone surfaces like phantoms. Sarah could feel an electric tension in the air, making her skin prickle and her heart pound. Suddenly, the light before them shifted, revealing another passage spiraling downward. Thick, inky shadows pooled in the entrance, expanding like a living thing, sucking the light like a black hole. It was impossible to tell how deep it went or what devoured it, but there was nowhere left to run. Down there? Jason hesitated, fear flashing across his face. It's better than that, Sarah pointed back. The creature lurched forward, a terrible growl escaping its maw, slicing through her courage like glass. Okay! They plunged into the darkness, tumbling downward into an abyss of shadow. The air turned heavy and suffocating as they descended, the walls pressing in tighter, the ground uneven and treacherous. An eerie silence enveloped them, swallowing any last shred of hope. At the bottom, the two stumbled into an expansive cavern, the air thick with dampness and mold. Sarah squinted, and slowly the darkness revealed grotesque stone pillars adorned with the same twisted symbols they had seen before. The ground pulsed beneath them, almost like it was alive. "What is this place?" Jason whispered, eyes darting around nervously. "I don't know," Sarah replied, taking in the unsettling sight. "But we can't stay here." As they moved deeper into the cavern, the shadows danced around them, tormented silhouettes that flickered and twisted as if trying to influence their every thought. The air felt different here, laden with despair, as if centuries of anguish were trapped in the walls, waiting to consume the next unfortunate souls. Suddenly, a faint whisper drifted through the cavern, chilling Sarah to the core. It was inane, half-formed words murmured in an unintelligible language, wrapping around her mind like a snake. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice tremoring slightly. "Yeah," Jason muttered, backing away. "Maybe it's a way out." Before they could further discuss, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, shaking the very ground beneath them. "Run!" Sarah screamed, racing towards an apparent dip in the cavern. But as they sprinted, the whispers warped into screams, the very walls vibrating with the sound of tortured souls. The darkness thickened, clawing at their minds, filling their thoughts with despair. Just as they reached the ridge at the bottom of the cavern, a blinding light erupted, illuminating everything for just a moment. In that fleeting second, shadows darted across the cavern walls, and Sarah caught a glimpse of myriad faces twisted in pain and fear, eyes wide with longing and regret. "What was that?" Jason gasped, balking as the light faded back to the consuming dark. "I don't know," Sarah stuttered, shaking, "but we can't stop now." They ran toward an archway leading further into the unknown, the whispers now morphing into a low, menacing chant. The tone grew more animalistic, hungry, relentless. Sarah's heart thundered in her ears as they crossed the threshold, each step echoing against an unseen expanse beyond. A dreadful sense of urgency descended upon her, an instinct screaming that whatever lay ahead was bound to reveal the truth. But at what cost? "Sarah!" Jason's voice broke through her swirling thoughts. "What?" "Something's coming." She turned, terror flooding her. The shadows twisted and coalesced, and before she could react, the growls vibrated like thunder, heavy and menacing. The true horror of their descent was about to unveil itself, but would they be ready? The walls moaned, and surely the secrets of the cavern hungered for freedom. Sarah and Jason surged through the archway, adrenaline pulsing like wildfire. The cavern whispered secrets in an unholy tongue, echoing off the damp stone walls. The air was thick, a suffocating blanket pressing against them. They could feel it. The darkness was alive, watching, swirling around them like a predator toying with its prey. "Do you see anything?" Jason gasped, glancing back over his shoulder. "No, just shadows." Sarah's pulse quickened. Panic clutched at her chest. She had to stay focused. They had come too far to succumb to fear now. Every instinct screamed at her to keep moving, to escape this nightmare. Each step into the cavern was like wading through molasses. They trudged deeper, shadows twisting and rippling, transforming each flicker of light into a grotesque mockery. Sarah caught fleeting glimpses of tortured faces. Wails of despair echoed, flitting past her consciousness like a dream she couldn't awaken from. "Over there," Jason shouted, pointing at a faint glimmer in the depths of the cave. It flickered uncertainly, a soft light battling against the oppressive darkness. "Is it a way out?" Sarah felt a surge of hope. They ran toward it, hearts pounding like drums. But the shadows responded, coiling around their ankles, trying to pull them back into the abyss. "No, not today!" she shouted, shaking free from the icy grip. As they neared the light, it spilled into a wider chamber, revealing a stone altar at its center. The air was thick with age, and the stench of rot filled her nostrils. "This looks like a ritual space," Jason said, his voice tight with fear. "I'm not liking this." On the altar lay the book, its cover shimmering in the light, like a beacon of hope. "We have to see what it says," Sarah urged, despite her racing heart. "What if it holds the answers to what we're running from?" Jason hesitated, dread in his eyes. "Or what if it can stop this?" she countered, the glimmer of desperation pushing her forward. She approached the altar, and as she reached for the book, a guttural roar shattered the cavern's stillness. "Run!" Jason shouted, pulling her back, just as the shadows erupted like a storm. They lunged toward them, dark tendrils grasping at the air, shrieking in a frenzy. "Go! Get through that opening!" Sarah pointed to a narrow crack in the stone. They darted toward it, clawing for escape as the growls morphed into a deafening cacophony. The shadows fought against them, slipping through the cracks in their resolve. "Almost there," Jason urged, the darkness roaring behind them, but Sarah stumbled, her foot snagging on a jagged stone. Pain flared as she fell, and she felt the chilling breath of the darkness on her neck. "No!" Jason reached for her. "Grab my hand!" With a surge of energy she lunged forward, grasping his arm as he pulled her up. They ran for the crack, bodies squeezing through just as the shadows surged behind them, the cries echoing into an otherworldly fury. They tumbled out, gasping for breath, landing on the moist forest floor. Panic still coursed through Sarah, but the familiar sounds of nocturnal life replaced the dark whispers. They were free from the cave, but the shadows lingered, clawing at their minds, eager for a way back in. Jason's eyes were wild, searching the ominous trees. "What about everyone else?" "We have to go back for them," Sarah said, resolve hardening in her chest. "They're still trapped in that horror. But how? They'll be waiting for us. Then we find help. We can't leave others to suffer," she replied, and with that she began to walk toward the road leading back to Maplewood. Jason hesitated before joining her. "Okay, let's do this smart." As they stepped into the pale moonlight, determination pulsed in their veins. They would stand up against this darkness, fight for others like them, and unravel the sinister web spun by their neighbors. The battle wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The hushed whispers of the dark followed, but a flicker of defiance ignited in Sarah's heart. Together, they would expose the truth. "Let's go save our neighbors," she declared, steeling herself for the fight ahead. As they walked, a new-found resolve wrapped around them like a shield. The shadows may have been hungry, but they weren't the prey anymore. The monsters hiding behind the smiles would soon learn fear. That was a promise she intended to keep. And just like that, they stepped into the unknown, ready to confront whatever evils lurked in the depths of Maplewood. Now, it's your turn to make your voice heard. You need to subscribe to the channel now before you miss out on more exclusive tales like this. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm. You know it matters. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about how you think the story will unfold. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this thrilling conclusion. Let's uncover these secrets together.